Commander Zrith stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the primitive human colony with 4 eyes that showed nothing but contempt. He was a high-ranking Kraith officer, his blue-gray skin marked with scars from many successful raids. His species had conquered dozens of weaker civilizations, and this would be another easy victory. "Status report," he commanded, his voice harsh and clicking. The weapons officer checked his displays. "The colony has minimal defenses, Commander. 2 automated turrets of ancient design. No shields detected. No military vessels in orbit. No defensive satellites. They have not even attempted to evacuate." Zrith's mandibles clicked together in satisfaction. Foolish humans. They think their Earth Defense Force will protect them. By the time help arrives, we will have taken everyone prisoner and left this system. This raid had a purpose beyond simple conquest. The Kraith sovereignty wanted to test human resolve. If Earth could not protect its colonies, other human settlements would be easy targets. This attack would begin a new era of Kraith expansion into human territory. "All ships attack formation," Zrith ordered. "Target their power generation first, then their communications. We want them alive for questioning and slave labor." The 12 Kraith warships moved into a tight formation, their weapons charging. They were beautiful ships in a deadly way, hulls made of exotic metals that reflected the starlight. Each ship carried enough firepower to level a city. Against one small mining colony with no defenses, it should have been an easy victory. On the surface of the moon, Jake Morrison watched the enemy fleet on his tactical display. He saw them moving closer, saw them grouped together in an arrogant formation that assumed no real resistance. "Perfect. All mass drivers. Fire," he said calmly. The moon's surface erupted with violence. 6 mass drivers fired at the exact same moment, their magnetic coils releasing 3 years of stored power in one tremendous surge. The sound was incredible, a deep thrumming that shook the ground and made people stumble. 6 10-ton slugs of compressed ore launched into space at speeds that made the cargo containers scream. The sensors attached to each slug immediately began broadcasting, sending out signals that made them look like guided missiles with multiple warheads. The Kraith bridge erupted in alarm. "Commander, multiple missile launches detected, tracking at least 30 incoming targets." Zrith spun toward his weapons officer. "What? How?" "They have no missile systems." "Unknown, Commander. But the signatures indicate guided weapons with high explosive warheads. Our point defense systems are engaging. The Kraith fleet's automated defenses activated instantly. Laser turrets swiveled and fired, their beams lancing out to intercept the incoming projectiles. The first 2 ore slugs exploded in brilliant flashes as the lasers found their marks. But the mass drivers were still firing. Every 20 seconds, another 6 projectiles launched from the surface. Then more and more, creating a continuous stream of metal flying toward the Kraith fleet. "Target lock failures," the weapons officer shouted. "The projectiles are jamming our sensors. Multiple false readings." That was Danny Cole's electronic warfare packages doing their job. The sensors attached to each slug were broadcasting random signals, creating ghost images that made the Kraith computers think there were dozens more targets than actually existed. The Kraith point defense systems began to struggle. They were designed to handle maybe 20 simultaneous targets per ship. Now they were tracking what looked like hundreds of contacts, their processing power overwhelmed by false data. And while they were busy shooting at sensor ghosts, the real projectiles kept coming. The first slug that got through the defenses hit a Kraith frigate on its port side. The impact was catastrophic. 10 tons of solid metal moving at impossible velocity punched through the shield like it was paper. The ore slug tore through the hull, ripped through 3 interior decks, and exited out the other side, leaving a gaping hole that vented atmosphere in a glowing stream. "Hull breach. Frigate 7 is reporting critical damage." Someone on the Kraith bridge screamed. "Impossible!" Zrith shouted. "Those are just kinetic projectiles. Our shields should stop them." But the shields were designed for energy weapons. Solid matter moving at high speed was a different problem, one the Kraith had not prepared for because nobody used kinetic weapons anymore. Nobody except desperate humans with mining equipment. Jake watched his screen with cold satisfaction as the first Kraith ship started to tumble, its engines dead. "Keep firing. Load the explosive packages into the queue. We need to maintain pressure." Lisa's voice came over the comm, tense with concentration. "Mass driver 4 is overheating. I can give you maybe 2 more minutes before it melts. 2 minutes is enough." Keep it firing. More ore slugs hammered into space. The Kraith ships tried to scatter, breaking their tight formation, but they were too close together and moving too fast. A second frigate took a direct hit to its engine section. A third ship's bridge was struck, killing everyone inside instantly. Commander Zrith watched his fleet falling apart and could not believe what was happening. In less than 3 minutes, he had lost 3 ships to a mining colony. A mining colony with no military assets. It was humiliating. It was impossible. It was human. Return fire, he screamed.
Destroy that colony. Kill them all.
The Kraith warships opened up with their main weapons. Energy beams powerful enough to melt mountains lanced down toward the moon's surface. The destructive power was incredible, enough to vaporize the mass drivers and everyone near them. But Lisa had prepared for this too. The colony's magnetic field generators, normally used to protect the settlement from solar radiation, had been reconfigured. When the Kraith fired, Lisa activated the generators at maximum power. A powerful electromagnetic pulse radiated from the colony, invisible but effective. The Kraith targeting sensors went crazy, their aim scattered by the interference. Energy beams that should have destroyed mass drivers instead carved smoking trenches in empty rock hundreds of meters away. Their targeting is off. Jake shouted. Lisa, whatever you are doing, keep doing it. The generators are burning out, Lisa replied. I can give you maybe 1 more minute. The battle had become chaos. The Kraith fleet was scattered, their formation broken, their point defense systems overwhelmed. They were fighting an enemy they did not understand, using weapons they had never seen. More ore slugs found their targets. A destroyer lost its forward section, the hull splitting open like a broken toy. Another frigate's reactor took a direct hit and went critical, the ship vanishing in a brief sun that made everyone look away. Then one of Danny Cole's explosive packages got through. The 500-pound container of mining explosives hit a Kraith cruiser amidships. The container was moving so fast that it punched through the hull before the explosives detonated. When they did explode, the blast tore through multiple decks, ruptured fuel lines, and triggered a chain reaction. The cruiser broke in half, both pieces tumbling away, trailing debris and bodies. Commander Zrith stared at his displays in horror. In 5 minutes, he had lost 6 ships. 6. To a colony that was not supposed to have any weapons at all. His career was over. His life was probably over. The sovereignty did not forgive failure. All ships retreat, he finally ordered, his pride shattered. Emergency jump protocols. Get us out of here. But Jake Morrison had been counting on exactly this moment. Faster-than-light drives took time to charge, usually about 30 seconds. 30 seconds where the ships were vulnerable and could not maneuver effectively. Lisa now, Jake commanded. In the power station, Greg Palmer authorized the final gambit. Every remaining watt of power in the colony, everything they had left, channeled into one massive electromagnetic pulse. The fusion reactor screamed in protest, its containment field pushed beyond every safety limit. The magnetic field generators, already damaged and overheating, released one last burst of energy. This time it was not a targeted pulse meant to scatter aim. This was a wave of electromagnetic interference powerful enough to be detected from neighboring star systems. The pulse raced outward from the moon at the speed of light. It washed over the remaining Kraith ships just as their faster-than-light drives began to charge. The electromagnetic interference scrambled their navigation systems, corrupted their jump calculations, and overwhelmed their safety protocols. 3 Kraith ships tried to jump anyway. Their drives, confused by the interference, tore holes in space-time that consumed the vessels from within. The ships simply ceased to exist, ripped apart by physics they could not control. The remaining 3 ships, including Commander Zrith's flagship, fled in panic. They jumped to hyperspace on random vectors, just trying to escape, abandoning their mission and their dignity. In 7 minutes, the battle was over. A Kraith raiding fleet of 12 warships had been reduced to 3 survivors fleeing in terror. 9 ships destroyed or damaged beyond repair. Hundreds of Kraith warriors dead, all by a mining colony with no military assets. In the colony control center, silence fell. Jake Morrison slumped in his chair, his hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Around him, colonists stared at their screens in disbelief. "Did we?" someone started to say. "We won." Greg Palmer finished, his voice barely above a whisper. "We actually won." Lisa's voice came over the comm, exhausted but alive. 6 months passed since the 7-minute battle that changed everything. New Haven Colony looked very different now, though not in the ways most people expected. Yes, they had better defenses. Yes, Earth Defense Force engineers had installed a proper orbital sensor grid and updated their communication systems. A small military garrison now called the colony home. 20 soldiers who would ensure no enemy fleet could surprise them again. But the biggest changes were not physical. They were in how humanity viewed its colonies and how colonies viewed themselves. Admiral Hayes had kept his promise. The Adaptive Defense Initiative launched 3 months after his visit to New Haven. The program was simple in concept, but revolutionary in practice. Every frontier colony received equipment designed to serve double purposes. Mining tools that could become weapons, power systems that could be weaponized, communication arrays that could coordinate defense networks. More importantly, the program trained people. Colonial administrators learned tactical thinking. Engineers learned how to modify civilian equipment for emergency use. Security personnel learned to coordinate defenses with whatever resources they had available. New Haven became the training center for this program. Delegations from dozens of colonies visited to see where it all began. They walked through the rebuilt mass driver installations. They studied the sensor data from the battle. They met with the people who had turned mining equipment into weapons and survived. Lisa Monroe gave technical briefings almost every week. She showed visiting engineers the modifications she had made, explaining the physics and the risks. You cannot just copy what we did, she always emphasized. Every colony is different. Every moon or planet has different resources. The key is understanding your equipment well enough to push it beyond its designed limits when necessary. She had refused all the job offers from Earth, choosing to stay on New Haven. But that did not mean she was idle. Lisa designed the equipment specifications for the Adaptive Defense Initiative, ensuring that future colonies would have tools that were both functional for daily use and capable of being weaponized if needed. Jake Morrison became an unlikely teacher. Former military officers visited regularly to observe his training methods. They wanted to know how he had coordinated civilians with no combat experience into an effective fighting force. I did not turn them into soldiers, Jake explained during one such visit. I taught them to think tactically with what they had. Most military training assumes you have proper weapons and support. Out here you have mining lasers and cargo haulers. The mindset is completely different. His training program for colonial security became standard across human space. It focused on adaptability, creative problem solving, and using environmental factors to your advantage. Military academies started teaching it as an alternative to traditional combat doctrine. Jake still had nightmares sometimes about the battle. 7 minutes of violence that could have ended with everyone dead. But he also knew that those 7 minutes had probably saved thousands of lives on other colonies that would now be prepared if raiders came. Danny Cole and Kevin Wright became minor celebrities in engineering circles. Their electronic warfare techniques using mining equipment were now studied in universities. They gave occasional lectures, though both men were more comfortable working with machines than talking to crowds. We just used what we had, Kevin always said when people praised their work. It was not genius. It was desperation plus spare parts. But desperation plus spare parts had defeated a fleet, and that lesson was being learned across human space. Helen Pierce received the most unexpected reward. Her xenobiology data about the Kraith had been so valuable that Earth Defense Force offered her a position as Chief Xenobiological Consultant, unlike the others she accepted, though she split her time between Earth and New Haven. Someone needs to study these species we are encountering, she explained. Understanding them might prevent future conflicts, or at least help us win if conflict is unavoidable. Greg Palmer remained as colony administrator, but his job was easier now. Supplies arrived on time. Equipment requests were approved quickly. Earth officials who had ignored him before now returned his messages within hours. It was darkly funny. He thought that it took winning, a battle for people to remember that colonies were important. But the changes went beyond just New Haven. The battle's impact rippled across known space in ways no one had predicted. The Kraith sovereignty had to deal with the embarrassing reality that their raiding fleet had been destroyed by a mining colony. Commander Zrith, the officer who had led the attack, was executed for his failure. But more importantly, The Kraith leadership had to reconsider their entire strategy regarding human space. If a weak human colony could destroy 9 warships, what could Earth's actual military do? The Kraith quietly canceled their expansion plans toward human territory. The risk was too high, the potential for humiliation too great. Other alien species took notice as well. The battle became required study in military academies across multiple civilizations, not because the tactics were brilliant, but because they revealed something fundamental about human psychology. Humans did not see obstacles. They saw resources. They did not accept defeat. They invented new ways to win, and most dangerously, they could turn anything into a weapon if sufficiently motivated. Ambassador Trell, a diplomatic representative from the Vaxxan Collective, visited New Haven 8 months after the battle. The Vaxxans were a peaceful species who had allied with humanity early in Earth's expansion into space. Greg met with the ambassador in the colony's conference room. Trell was a tall, thin being with blue skin and large eyes that showed intelligence and curiosity. "I came to see this place for myself," Trell explained through a translation device. "My people have studied what happened here. We find it both fascinating and slightly terrifying." "Terrifying?" Greg asked. "You defeated 12 warships with mining equipment," Trell said. "My people have always admired human ingenuity, but this demonstrates how dangerous humans can be when threatened. It makes us grateful we are allies rather than enemies." Greg nodded slowly. "We did not want to fight. We just wanted to survive. The Kraith gave us no choice." "That is what makes it more impressive," Trell replied. "You did not prepare for battle. You had no warning, no time to build proper weapons. You simply adapted and survived. That ability is rare in the galaxy." The ambassador's visit was pleasant, but it made Greg think about how the galaxy viewed humanity now. They had always been seen as expansionist and somewhat reckless. Now they were also seen as dangerously creative and impossible to predict. That reputation might prevent future attacks, or it might encourage them. Only time would tell. New Haven Colony itself slowly returned to normal life. The garrison soldiers blended into the community. The damaged mass drivers were rebuilt better than before. Mining operations continued, producing ore for Earth's industries. But the colonists were different now. They had faced death and won. They had proven that location and equipment mattered less than determination and creativity. They walked with more confidence, knowing they could handle whatever challenges came their way. Kevin Wright stood at the repaired mass driver number 2 one afternoon, running routine maintenance. A group of visiting engineers watched him work, taking notes and asking questions. "How does it feel?" one engineer asked. "To know this equipment destroyed enemy warships?" Kevin paused, wrench in hand. "Honestly, I try not to think about it. This is a tool for launching cargo. We only used it as a weapon because we had no choice. I hope we never have to do it again." "But you would if necessary," the engineer pressed. "Of course," Kevin replied without hesitation. "We are human. We do what needs to be done." That simple statement captured the legacy of New Haven's battle. Humans did what needed to be done, using whatever was available, refusing to accept defeat even when defeat seemed inevitable. 1 year after the battle, a monument was erected in the colony's central plaza. It was simple, just a piece of melted metal from mass driver number 4 mounted on a stone base. A plaque read, "In memory of 7 minutes that changed everything. We were Earth's weakest colony, but we were never weak. We were human." The dedication ceremony was attended by Admiral Hayes, representatives from dozens of colonies, and even a few alien ambassadors. Speeches were given about courage and ingenuity. The colonists who had fought were recognized as heroes, but after the ceremony ended and the visitors left, life went on. The colonists returned to their jobs, their families, their daily routines. The monument became a landmark that children played around, not understanding its full significance yet. Jake Morrison sat in the security center one quiet evening, watching the sensor displays show empty space. Everything was peaceful. The new defense grid was working perfectly. No threats appeared on the screens. Lisa stopped by carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Jake and sat down beside him. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "All the attention and changes?" Jake thought about it. "No. We did what we had to do. If the attention helps other colonies survive, then it was worth it. I just wish we could have avoided the fight entirely." But we could not, Lisa said. And now everyone knows that colonies can fight back. That knowledge alone might save lives. The colony control center remained silent for almost a full minute after the last Kraith ship jumped away. People stared at their screens, not quite believing what had just happened. Then someone started laughing, a slightly hysterical sound that spread through the room like wildfire. Jake Morrison stayed in his chair, feeling the adrenaline drain from his body and leave him exhausted. His hands were trembling. During the battle, his military training had kept him calm and focused. Now that it was over, the reality of what they had faced hit him like a physical weight. Greg Palmer was the first to snap back to action. All stations report status. I need damage assessments and casualty reports immediately. The responses came in slowly. Miraculously, no one had been killed. 3 people were injured when a Kraith energy beam hit near mass driver number 6, but the injuries were not serious. The magnetic interference had saved countless lives by scattering the enemy fire. Life support is coming back online, one technician reported. We will have heat and air circulation in about 20 minutes. Medical bay is secure and standing by for any wounded, another voice added. Lisa Monroe appeared on the main screen, her face covered in soot and her hair singed on one side. Mass drivers 1 and 4 are total losses. They literally melted from the stress. Driver 2 is damaged, but I think I can repair it. 3, 5, and 6 are functional but need maintenance. The magnetic field generators are completely destroyed, and our fusion reactor is running hot enough to make me very nervous. Can you shut it down safely? Greg asked, already working on it. Give me 30 minutes and I will have it back to normal power levels. But we pushed it way beyond design limits. It needs a complete inspection before we can trust it again. Helen Pierce was at her station, compiling data from the battle. I recorded everything our sensors captured. Ship configurations, weapon signatures, shield frequencies. This data will be incredibly valuable to Earth's military intelligence. Greg nodded, then turned to the communications officer. What is our comm status? The main array is still functional barely. But something strange is happening, sir. I am picking up dozens of incoming transmissions. From Earth Defense Force ships, from other colonies, even from commercial vessels. I think they all detected the battle. Greg frowned. Put the strongest signal through. The main screen switched to show the bridge of a massive warship. A man in an Earth Defense Force admiral's uniform stared out at them, his weathered face showing shock and confusion. This was Admiral Richard Hayes, commander of the Outer Territories Fleet. New Haven Colony, this is Admiral Hayes of the EDF Valiant. We detected massive energy signatures and weapons fire from your location. What is your status? Greg straightened his uniform and tried to look professional despite the chaos around him. Admiral, this is Administrator Greg Palmer. New Haven Colony is secure. We were attacked by a Kraith raiding fleet consisting of 12 warships. We successfully repelled the attack with civilian equipment and improvised weapons. The engagement lasted approximately 7 minutes. Admiral Hayes stared at him for a long moment. You repelled a Kraith fleet? With what military assets? None, sir, Greg replied. We used industrial mass drivers as kinetic weapons and electromagnetic pulse generators for defensive interference. Our security chief, former Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, coordinated the tactical response. The Admiral's expression went from confused to stunned. In the background, Greg could see other officers frantically checking their instruments, probably thinking this was some kind of mistake or malfunction. Administrator Palmer, the Admiral finally said, I need you to send me all your sensor data immediately. The Valiant will arrive at your location in 6 days. Until then, I am dispatching every available support vessel to provide security and assistance. What you have accomplished is... He paused, searching for words. We will discuss it in detail when I arrive. Haze out, the transmission ended. Greg looked around the control center at his exhausted, soot-covered, amazing people. We did it, he said simply. We actually did it. Over the next few hours, messages poured in from across human space. News of the battle spread impossibly fast, carried by the quantum communication network that connected human colonies and ships. Every transmission was the same. Shock, disbelief, and demands for confirmation. A mining colony had destroyed a Kraith fleet. A settlement with no military presence had won a space battle using industrial equipment. It seemed impossible, but the sensor data did not lie. Within 12 hours, New Haven Colony became the most famous human settlement in the galaxy. News organizations requested interviews. Military analysts wanted to study the battle tactics. Scientists asked for detailed technical specifications of the improvised weapons. Jake Morrison found himself giving the same briefing over and over to different military officers who could reach the colony by comm. They all wanted to know the same things: how he had coordinated the attack, how he had predicted the Kraith responses, how he had trained civilians to operate weapon systems. It was not genius, Jake explained patiently for what felt like the 100th time. We just looked at what we had and figured out how to use it. The Kraith assumed we were helpless, so they came in arrogant and unprepared. We used their assumptions against them. But you defeated 12 warships, one young officer said, all clear in his voice. We got lucky, Jake replied. Very lucky. If the Kraith had been more careful, if they had stayed at longer range, if their shields had been configured differently, we would all be dead or enslaved right now. Do not turn this into some perfect tactical victory. It was a desperate gamble that happened to work. But people did not want to hear about luck or desperation. They wanted heroes, and New Haven had provided them. Lisa Monroe became even more sought after than Jake. Defense contractors from all over human space offered her positions with salaries that would have made her wealthy beyond imagination. They wanted her expertise, her innovative thinking, her ability to turn civilian equipment into weapons. She turned them all down. These people are my family, she told one particularly persistent recruiter. This colony is my home. You want to learn from what we did? Fine, I will share our technical data freely, but I'm staying here. Danny Cole and Kevin Wright found themselves famous too. Their improvised electronic warfare packages studied by military academies, the way they had used mining drone, sensors and communication equipment to fool advanced Kraith. Targeting systems was now being taught as an example of creative problem-solving. Helen Pierce's xenobiology data about Kraith ship designs became classified military intelligence within hours of being transmitted to Earth. She received a personal thank you message from the head of Earth Defense Force Intelligence, saying her information would save human lives in future encounters. Greg Palmer spent most of his time dealing with bureaucrats and officials from Earth who suddenly cared very much about New Haven Colony. The same people who had ignored his requests for better equipment and more supplies were now offering everything he could possibly want. We are allocating a budget for proper orbital defenses, one Earth official said during a video call, and increasing your supply shipments to once per month. New Haven has proven its strategic importance. Greg wanted to point out that they had been strategically important all along, that every colony deserved proper support regardless of how much ore they produced. But he was too tired to argue, and he knew this attention would not last. In a few months, some other crisis would distract Earth, and New Haven would be forgotten again. Except now they had proven they could defend themselves. 5 days after the battle, supply ships began arriving. Real military supply ships carrying spare parts, medical supplies, food, and equipment. The first ship also carried a team of Earth Defense Force engineers who wanted to study the damaged mass drivers and help with repairs. Lieutenant Susan Wells was the team leader, a competent engineer in her early 30s who treated the colonists with genuine respect. We are not here to take over, she assured Lisa. We are here to learn. What you accomplished with industrial equipment is remarkable. Lisa showed her the wreckage of mass driver number 4. The entire installation had melted. The magnetic coils fused into useless lumps of metal. This is what happens when you run equipment at 300% capacity with no safety limits. Susan examined the damage with professional interest. But it worked. You got enough shots off to win the battle before the equipment failed. That is brilliant engineering. It was desperate engineering, Lisa corrected. We did what we had to do to survive. That is what good engineering is, Susan replied with a smile. On the 6th day, Admiral Hayes arrived aboard the Valiant, a massive battlecruiser that made the entire colony stop and stare. Ships that large rarely came to settlements as small as New Haven. The Admiral brought with him a full security detail, technical experts, and enough military brass to make Greg nervous. The meeting was held in the colony's small conference room, which was not designed to hold so many important people. Admiral Hayes sat at the head of the table with Greg, Jake, Lisa, and Helen representing the colony. I have reviewed all the sensor data, the Admiral began. I have read the reports and watched the tactical recordings. New Haven Colony sat on a small moon at the edge of space where humans lived. Most people back on Earth had forgotten it even existed. The colony was small with only 300 people living there. They were miners, engineers, and farmers trying to make a life on this lonely rock floating in the darkness. The moon itself was not pretty. Gray dust covered everything. Sharp rocks stuck up from the ground like broken teeth. The sky was always black because there was no air to make it blue. The only beautiful thing was the view of the stars, which looked brighter here than anywhere else. Greg Palmer was in charge of the colony. He sat in his small office looking at reports on his computer screen. The numbers were not good. Their fusion reactor was old and only working at 60% power. The big antenna they used to talk to other colonies was broken and took forever to send messages. Their defense systems were a joke, just two old gun turrets that were older than most of the people living here. Greg rubbed his tired eyes. Supply ships only came once every 6 months, and the next one was not due for another 4 months. They were running low on spare parts, medical supplies, and decent food. But that was life on New Haven. You made do with what you had. Lisa Monroe walked into his office without knocking. She was the chief engineer, a woman in her 30s with short black hair always covered in grease stains. Her hands were rough from working with machines all day. "We need to talk about the water recyclers," she said, leaning against the door frame. "Unit 3 is making a weird noise. Can you fix it?" Greg asked. "I can fix anything," Lisa said with a tired smile, "but I am running out of parts. I have been cannibalizing the backup systems to keep the main ones running." Greg sighed. This was always the problem. New Haven was so unimportant that Earth Defense Force did not bother sending them proper supplies. The colony produced just enough refined minerals to pay for its existence, but barely. Nobody back home cared about 300 people living on a worthless moon. "Do what you can," Greg told her. "We will make it work like we always do." Lisa nodded and left. Greg went back to his reports, trying to figure out how to stretch their resources until the next supply ship arrived. In another part of the colony, Jake Morrison sat in the security center staring at screens showing the empty space around their moon. He was a former military pilot who had taken this job after an injury forced him out of active service. The security center was small, just one room with old computers and sensor equipment that barely worked half the time. Jake was in his early 40s with gray starting to show in his brown hair. He had a scar on his left arm from the accident that ended his military career. Most days his job was boring. He watched empty space, checked that the automated turrets were working, and trained a small group of volunteers who made up the colony security team. These volunteers were not soldiers. They were miners and technicians who learned basic security procedures in their spare time. They had never faced any real danger. The most exciting thing that had happened in the past year was when a mining robot went haywire and Jake had to shut it down remotely. The sensor screen suddenly lit up with red warnings. Jake sat up straight, his military training kicking in instantly. Multiple contacts were entering the system, coming fast toward the moon. He ran the identification program, but the computer could not match the ships to any known design. Jake counted 12 ships. 12. His mouth went dry. New Haven had no defenses against one warship, let alone 12. He pressed the emergency comm button. "Greg, you need to get to the security center right now. We have incoming ships, unknown configuration." Within 5 minutes, the small security center was crowded with people. Greg arrived first, followed by Lisa and Dr. Helen Pierce, the colony's science officer. Helen was a xenobiologist, someone who studied alien life forms. She was a thin woman in her 50s with gray hair tied back in a ponytail. Helen looked at the screen showing the approaching ships, and her face went pale. "Those are Kraith vessels," she whispered. "I have seen their ship designs in the classified databases I accessed during my university days." "Kraith?" Greg asked. "I thought they stayed away from human space." "They do usually," Helen said, her voice shaking slightly. "But they are raiders. They attack weak targets, conquer them, and take prisoners as slaves. They must think we are an easy target." Jake was already running calculations on his screen. "They will be here in 40 minutes, maybe 35 if they speed up. Can we evacuate?" Greg asked. "Get everyone on the transport shuttles and run?" Jake shook his head. "Our shuttles are slow cargo haulers. Those warships would catch us in minutes and destroy us in open space. We are safer on the ground, at least we have some rocks and buildings for cover." "What about calling for help?" Lisa asked. "I already sent out a distress signal," Jake replied. "But the nearest Earth Defense Force patrol is 3 weeks away. Nobody can reach us in time." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. The Kraith were coming to destroy or enslave them, and New Haven had no way to fight back. Their two old turrets could not even scratch the paint on a modern warship. They had no shields, no missiles, no military ships, nothing. Greg looked around at his people. They were scared, but they were not panicking. These were colonists, people who had chosen to live on the edge of civilized space. They were used to problems and finding solutions. There has to be something we can do, Greg said. We did not come all this way just to give up. Lisa was quiet for a moment, staring at the tactical display. Her engineer's mind was working through possibilities. We might not have military weapons, she said slowly, but we have industrial equipment. Lots of it. What good is mining equipment against warships? Helen asked. Maybe more than you think, Lisa replied, her eyes getting brighter as an idea formed. This moon has a strong magnetic field, right? That is why our sensors are always glitchy, and we have been mining heavy metals for 3 years. We have 60,000 tons of refined ferromagnetic ore sitting in our storage silos. Jake leaned forward, his combat experience telling him where Lisa was going with this. And we have mass drivers to launch those ore containers into space for pickup. Exactly, Lisa said. Mass drivers are basically railguns. They use magnetic acceleration to launch cargo. If we reprogram them and overload the power systems, we could launch ore slugs at extremely high velocity. You want to shoot rocks at them? Greg asked, not sure if Lisa was serious. Not rocks, Lisa corrected. 10-ton slugs of compressed metal moving at speeds that would punch through most ship hulls. Mass drivers do not care what they are launching. We designed them to be gentle with cargo, but the physics works just as well for weapons if we remove the safety limits. Helen was nodding slowly. Kinetic weapons. Most alien species, including the Kraith, focus their defenses on energy weapons like lasers and plasma cannons. Their shields might not be designed to stop solid projectiles moving at high speed. Jake pulled up a schematic of the colony on his screen. We have 6 mass driver installations around the colony. If we can get them all online and coordinate the firing, we might be able to put enough metal in space to make the Kraith think twice. It will take all our power, Lisa warned. We would have to shut down life support, lights, everything except essential systems. And there is a good chance the mass drivers will destroy themselves from the stress. How long do we have to set this up? Greg asked. Jake checked his countdown timer. 33 minutes now. Greg looked at each person in the room. They were not soldiers. They were civilians who came to this moon to mine and build a life. But they were also humans, and humans had a long history of fighting back against impossible odds. Do it, Greg decided. Get every engineer and technician we have. Lisa, you coordinate the mass driver modifications. Jake, you plan the firing sequences. Helen, find out everything you can about Kraith ship defenses. We are going to show these raiders what happens when they pick on humans. The group scattered, moving fast. Throughout the colony, people dropped what they were doing and ran to their emergency stations. Everyone knew what was coming. Everyone knew they were probably going to die. But not one person suggested surrendering, because they were human, and humans do not give up. The colony exploded into organized chaos. People ran in every direction, but everyone knew exactly where they needed to be. Years of safety drills and emergency procedures kicked in automatically. This was different from any drill they had practiced, but the colonists adapted quickly. Lisa Monroe sprinted toward the nearest mass driver installation, her engineering team right behind her. She was breathing hard, not from the running, but from the weight of what they were about to attempt. Mass drivers were designed to gently accelerate cargo containers into orbit. They had safety systems, speed limits, and automatic shutdown protocols to prevent accidents. Lisa was about to throw all of that out the window. Kevin, Danny, get to mass drivers 3 and 4, she called out to her team members. Start bypassing the safety interlocks. I want every limiter removed. We need maximum acceleration. Kevin Wright was a young technician, barely 25 years old. His hands were shaking as he pulled up the control panel. Lisa, if we remove the safeties, the drivers might tear themselves apart. Then they tear themselves apart, Lisa said grimly. We only need them to work for a few minutes. After that, it does not matter. She pulled open an access panel and started rerouting power cables with practiced efficiency. The mass drivers normally drew power gradually to avoid overloading the system. Now Lisa was connecting them directly to the main power grid with no regulators or buffers. At mass driver number 2, Danny Cole was doing the same thing. Danny was the colony supply manager, a stocky man in his 40s who knew where every piece of equipment was stored. He had brought cases of spare parts and was already replacing components that could not handle the increased power load. "Lisa, I have been thinking," Danny said over the comm. "We have those industrial explosives we use for breaking up asteroids. 8 tons of various grades. Could we use them?" Lisa paused, her mind racing. "Package them into the smallest containers we have and add them to the launch queue. If even one gets through their defenses and detonates inside a ship, it could cause serious damage." Across the colony, Jake Morrison was gathering everyone with technical or security experience. In the small briefing room, he had about 30 people, none of them trained soldiers. There were miners, computer technicians, farming specialists, and maintenance workers. "Listen up," Jake said, his voice calm and clear. "I know you are scared. I am scared too. But fear keeps us alive if we use it right. We have about 28 minutes before those ships arrive. Here is what we are going to do." He pulled up a diagram on the wall screen. "We are going to load the mass drivers with ore slugs wrapped in sensor packages from our mining drones. The sensors will broadcast signals that look like missiles or guided weapons. The Kraith will waste time and ammunition shooting at what they think are dangerous projectiles. But they are just chunks of metal," someone said. "Exactly," Jake replied. "But chunks of metal moving at high velocity are deadly. The Kraith do not know we are using mining equipment. They will think we have actual weapons. We are going to use their assumptions against them." He pointed to different people around the room. You, and you get to the cargo bays and start loading ore containers. Make them as dense as possible. You 3 help Danny package the explosives. The rest of you come with me to the control center. We need to coordinate timing between all 6 mass drivers." Helen Pierce was in her laboratory, frantically searching through her research databases. She had studied many alien species during her career, but the Kraith had always been secretive. Information about them was limited and usually classified. Come on, she muttered, typing rapidly. Finally, she found what she was looking for. A report from a colonial scout ship that had observed a Kraith patrol from a distance. The report included scans of their ship designs and shield configurations. She read quickly, her scientific mind absorbing the data. The Kraith shields were designed primarily for energy weapon defense. Lasers, plasma, particle beams, the usual weapons used in modern space combat. But the scouts' analysis noted that the Kraith seemed to have less protection against kinetic impacts. It made sense. Most species had moved away from kinetic weapons because they were slow, required precise aiming, and were easy to see coming. Energy weapons were faster and more efficient in most situations, but the Kraith had never fought humans before. They did not know that humans specialized in using whatever worked, regardless of whether it was modern or old-fashioned. Helen sent her findings to Jake immediately. Their shields are weak against kinetic impacts. If you can hit them with solid projectiles at high enough speed, you might punch right through. In the power station, Greg Palmer worked alongside the technicians to reroute every available watt of electricity. They were shutting down life support in empty sections, turning off lights, disabling entertainment systems, even draining power from the backup batteries. "Sir, if we channel this much power through the main lines, we could blow the whole grid," one technician warned. "Then we blow it," Greg said. "Make sure the medical bay and the emergency shelters have independent power. Everything else goes to the mass drivers and the magnetic field generators." The fusion reactor at the heart of the colony was humming louder than it ever had. Normally it ran at 60% capacity to extend its lifespan. Now the technicians were pushing it to 100%, then 105%, then higher. Warning lights flashed red across every control panel. "Reactor containment is holding," the chief technician reported. "But we can only maintain this output for maybe 15 minutes before we risk a breach." 15 minutes is all we need," Greg replied. Hoping that was true, Lisa finished the modifications on mass driver number 1 and ran a quick test. The entire structure vibrated with barely contained energy. She checked the targeting computer and nodded in satisfaction. The driver could now launch projectiles at 3 times its normal velocity. It would probably explode after a dozen shots, but a dozen shots might be all they needed. "All drivers report ready," she announced over the comm. "We have full power and manual firing control. Jake, they are all yours." Jake stood in the colony control center, surrounded by volunteers who were now operating weapon systems that should not exist. On his screen, he could see the Kraith fleet getting closer. They were in formation, 12 ships arranged in a perfect attack pattern. They looked confident. They looked unstoppable. They had no idea what was about to hit them. "Load all drivers," Jake ordered. "Ore slugs first, wrapped in sensor packages. On my mark, we fire in sequence. Driver 1, then 2, then 3, with 2-second intervals. We want to create a continuous stream of projectiles." Around the colony, massive magnetic accelerators began to charge. The colonists loading the projectiles worked quickly, sealing each 10-ton slug of compressed ore inside a container with electronic sensors attached. The sensors were programmed to broadcast multiple signatures, making each slug look like several different targets. Danny Cole personally loaded the explosive packages. These were smaller, only about 500 pounds each, but packed with mining explosives designed to shatter asteroids. He wrapped each one in electronic warfare equipment that would jam sensors and create false radar images. "This is crazy," Kevin muttered as he watched the loading process. "We are fighting a space battle with mining tools." "Crazy is what humans do best," Danny replied with a grin that did not quite hide his fear. Helen was now in the control center with Jake, having brought all her research data. "The Kraith will come in fast," she said, analyzing their approach vector. "They think we are helpless, so they will not bother with defensive formations. They will group together to overwhelm us quickly." "Good," Jake said. "Tight formations make it harder to dodge. What about their point defense systems?" "Standard laser grids and interceptor drones. They can handle maybe 20 targets simultaneously per ship. After that, their systems get overwhelmed." Jake did some quick math. If they could launch projectiles faster than the Kraith could destroy them, eventually something would get through. It was a numbers game, and the colonists had plenty of numbers in the form of ore slugs. "We need to launch everything we have in the first 5 minutes, Jake decided. "Hit them so hard and fast that their defenses cannot keep up." "Lisa, how many projectiles can we launch?" Lisa checked her calculations. "Each driver can launch approximately 1 projectile every 20 seconds at maximum power. 6 drivers, that is about 90 projectiles in 5 minutes if nothing breaks down. Make it happen." The countdown continued. 15 minutes. 10 minutes. 5 minutes. The Kraith fleet was now visible on the optical sensors. 12 gleaming ships that represented technology far beyond what the colonists possessed. Each warship was probably worth more than the entire New Haven colony. But the colonists were not trying to match technology with technology. They were doing something the Kraith would never expect. They were fighting with tools meant for honest work, modified by desperate people who refused to accept defeat. "All stations report ready," Greg announced, looking around the control center at his people. "Everyone to emergency shelters except essential personnel. If this does not work, at least some of us might survive." But nobody moved toward the shelters. The colonists stayed at their posts,